As we were talking about earlier, continuing resolutions, kind of inside jargon, we call them CRs, are typically as dry as Washington politics get. The bills, of course, have to be paid to keep the government's lights on. And so to speak about continuing resolutions or CRs, that's the way the government gets funded, especially in the current environment. In fact, can't quite remember when the last time we did budgets here. They just keep funding through these CRs. Well, this Friday, the federal government will again run out of funds, and Congress will attempt to pass a CR by the end of this week. It's already passed the House. It's in the Senate. But the continuing resolution the Senate is currently considered may bring with it some welcome news, as we were talking earlier, on the pro-life front. Joining us now to talk about this, Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma. Senator, welcome back to the program.
Always good to be able to see you. Literally just stepped off the floor of the Senate. We're in a vote series, and so glad to be able to connect with you.
Now, when will the CR be voted on? Is that today or tomorrow?
So it could be late tonight or early tomorrow. So they're still working on time, trying to negotiate a couple extra amendments on it.
Now, you and I are never really in support of the big bloated government that is being advanced, but there is some good news when it comes to the present CR, given where the Democrats are on so many important issues like life. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so it still maintains all the issues about Hyde Amendment protections, all of those aspects. We're still functioning under Trump's budget, basically, at this point, because Schumer and Pelosi have never worked together to be able to get a budget for this year. That means we're still under the previous president's budget, and this president literally has not passed a budget yet over a year into office.
You know, President Obama had the same issue multiple times, unable to pass a budget, and so did the CR. So I know there's some things we want to change, and a lot of policy often is involved in the budget, in the spending. But a lot of pro-lifers are relieved that all of those pro-life writers, the Hyde Amendment and others, are still there. And as long as the Democrats can't get their act together, they can't fulfill one of their main missions, and that is to force taxpayers to fund abortion.
Yeah, and that's where we want to be able to maintain that. No one really likes a CR because it's not strategic. We're not dealing with real budget issues and trying to be able to deal with new programs and ending old programs, because that's what budgets do when you're dealing with a multi-trillion-dollar budget. But we want to make sure, and that's what's some of the holdup in this process, that when we do get a final budget and it is put in place, it still has to have all the Hyde protections, the Weldon protections, as we talk about different things where we protect conscience issues, whether it be with foreign dollars, whether it be individuals here in the United States, and conscience protections to be able to say no to performing an abortion in a hospital setting or a clinical setting, or whether it be providing federal funds. All those things have to be maintained. We're not going to give 1 inch on any of those.
I want to move on here very quickly, just a moment, to the Equal Rights Amendment. One final question on the CR. I know some of your colleagues are working on trying to get an amendment to the CR regarding the mandates, the vaccine mandates. Right. Is the Senate likely to vote on that?
We will, absolutely. That's one of the things that we've negotiated and said that we will absolutely get a vote on these vaccine mandates. We've had the same vote before. As you know, Democrats vote unilaterally to say, no, there are 4 mandates, and Republicans overwhelmingly vote to be able to oppose those. We'll see how that vote comes up again tonight. We see Democrat cities like San Francisco and other places that are starting to be able to turn away from some of these mandates to say this is really getting absurd and all the mandate issues. We'll see if Washington, D.C. Democrats are getting the hint as well.
All right, Senator Lankford, I want to move on to the Equal Rights Amendment, first approved by the Senate back in 1973, sent on to the states for ratification, didn't make the cutoff. They extended the period of time from 1979 to 1982, still did not get the requisite number of states. But we saw where in 2017 you had Nevada, 18 you had Illinois, and then in 2020, Virginia. And so you have some on the left saying, oh, the time limits don't matter. This thing has now passed. So there's some trying to get this ratified. Is that correct?
It is pretty amazing. That is absolutely correct. Some are still trying to be able to ratify it. You are correct. They're saying time limits don't matter, when actually in the original statute that actually set up this constitutional amendment called the Equal Rights Amendment, it was specific in it. It only would work for 7 years. If all the states didn't ratify it for 7 years, then it's null and void. Congress came back, passed something while that 7-year time period was still there, and extended a couple of years. It still didn't pass during that time period. And now, decades later, even after some states have now come up and said, no, we wish we'd have never voted for that, we rescind our initial approval of the Equal Rights Amendment. What Democrats are trying to do is to say time limits don't matter. And all the states that actually rescinded their vote, they don't matter either, because we want to just be able to get this. And Tony, as crazy as it is, they've extended one more piece. They've actually now going to the archivist for the United States and going to him to be able to say, just ignore what's happened in all those states and just declare it a constitutional amendment, as if the archives of the United States could just unilaterally declare something in the Constitution of the United States. So it's gone from really absurd to really, really, really absurd at this point, and we continue to be able to press back.
And you've communicated to the archives regarding this.
I have actually, just be able to make it very clear, because Democrats continue to be able to press him to be able to say, just wave this through and just declare it into the Constitution. So what I've done is written out a letter, and I have quite a few of my colleagues that have joined me on it already, just to be able to say, here are the court cases that would tell you can't do this. Here's the constitutional argument that would tell you can't do this. The Department of Justice has already ruled on this and you can't do this. So don't do it. Don't break the law. Don't ruin your position and your tradition, especially when he is approaching retirement in the days ahead. Don't end this way by trying to be able to violate the United States Constitution when you've been the person actually protecting those sacred documents. Don't now walk away from them.
You're absolutely right. It's not his role. It's not his role to do this. So final question for you, Senator Lankford, up against a break here. Is this ultimately going to end up in the courts?
Well, I hope it never ends up in the courts with the issue with the ERA, because the courts have already ruled on it, and they've already said no, that the states that have declared this to be in there don't count because they've extended past the deadline. So if the archivist steps in and tries to declare it, that's going to end up in the courts. But the best thing that could happen now is to say, courts have already ruled on this, archivists walk away from it.
All right. Senator James Lankford, always good to see you, my friend.
It's always great to see you as well, Tony.
All right.